Welcome to the Nash Community College Drama Players Annual Spooktacular of radio thrills and live stream chills. This unforgettable live stream performance will feature the spine-tingling realm of the master of macabre, Edgar Allan. Tonight's mystery story is The System of Dr. Tarr and Professor Fether, brought to you by Big Bang Radio and Studio 67, featuring the performing talents of the Nash Community College Drama Players. We welcome you to a most memorable dinner party with the hosts of unforgettable guests.
During the autumn of 1863, while on a tour through the extreme southern provinces of France, my route led me within a few miles of a certain maison de santé, or private madhouse, about which I'd heard much in Paris from my medical friends. As I had never visited a place of the kind, I thought the opportunity too good to be lost. What follows is one gentleman's account of an evening spent in careful observation of this rather unconventional establishment. I believe the Maison de Santé is up ahead. I am most intrigued to view such a place, as I've heard much about their rather unique methods. We should turn aside for an hour or so and look through the establishment.
Truly, sir, I cannot. I believe my journey will not allow for delay. I must confess that I also have a usual horror at the sight of a lunatic. Please, not to let any mere courtesy towards myself interfere with the gratification of your curiosity. I will ride on leisurely so that you might overtake me during the day, or at all events during the next.
I do wonder if there might be some difficulty in obtaining entry, as the residence is a private establishment.
I have heard that unless you are personally acquainted with the superintendent, Monsieur Millard, or have some credential in the way of a letter, a difficulty might be found to exist, as the regulations of these private madhouses are more rigid than our public hospital laws. However, it happens that I have made the acquaintance of Millard some years ago through my travels in this area. I will so far assist you as to ride up to the door and introduce you, although I cannot bring myself to enter such a place.
You're kind indeed. I would be most obliged for your introduction. Turning from the main road, we entered a grass-grown bypath, which in half an hour nearly lost itself in a dense forest, clothing the base of a mountain. Through this dank and gloomy wood, we rode some 2 miles when the Maison de Santé came in view. It was a fantastic chateau, much dilapidated and indeed scarcely tenantable through age and neglect. Its aspect inspired me with absolute dread. And checking my horse, I half resolved to turn back. I soon, however, grew ashamed of my weakness and proceeded. As we rode up to the gate, I perceived it slightly open, and the visage of a man peering through. In an instant afterward, this man came forth.
Ah, my dear madame, it is lovely to see you again. What brings you to our fine establishment?
Monsieur Millard, it is most excellent to see you. May I present my traveling companion, Monsieur Albert Dupree? He has a desire to tour the establishment, having heard much about your methods. Alas, I cannot delay my journey, but hope that you will receive him and afford him the opportunity of satisfying his curiosity.
Most certainly, my dear friend. Please, Monsieur Dupree, come inside, and I will be happy to give you a tour of the premises. Au revoir, madame. This way, my good sir.
The superintendent ushered me into a small and exceedingly neat parlor, containing, among other indications of refined taste, many books, drawings, pots of flowers, and musical instruments. A cheerful fire blazed upon the hearth. I had heard at Paris that the institution of Monsieur Millard was managed upon what is vulgarly termed the system of soothing, that all punishments were avoided, that even confinement was seldom resorted to, that the patients, while secretly watched, were left much apparent liberty, and that most of them were permitted to roam about the house and grounds in the ordinary apparel of persons in the right mind.
Welcome, sir, to our maison de sant. Will you be staying with us long?
Quite the opposite, mademoiselle. I'm just stopping through on my travels, as Monsieur Millard has most agreeably offered to show me around.
Oh, you will find that the maison offers robust gardens where one can spend a most agreeable hour or two. You may also be interested in our collection of musical instruments. I quite prefer them myself.
As it happens, I am rather partial to music. Are you accomplished in other instruments, or do you prefer the piano?
Oh, at this time of day, I find I am most soothed by the melodies of Bellini.
Ah, yes, I am familiar with his music. His compositions are quite intricate, if I remember correctly. I confine my remarks in this manner to general topics, so as not to displease or excite, for I could not be sure if this young lady was sane or not.
Oh, I must bid you adieu. I do hope you will join us again soon.
Is the young lady a resident here?
No. Oh, no. A member of my family, yes. My niece, and a most accomplished woman.
I beg 1,000 pardons for the suspicion, but of course you will know how to excuse me. The excellent administration of your affairs here is well understood in Paris. And I thought it just possible, you know?
Yes. Say no more. Or rather, it is myself who should thank you for the commendable prudence you have displayed. We seldom find so much of forethought in young men, and more than once some unhappy contretemps has occurred in consequence of thoughtlessness on part of our visitors. While my former system was in operation and my patients were permitted to the roaming of to and fro at will, they were often aroused to a dangerous frenzy by injudicious persons who called to inspect the house. Hence, I was obliged to enforce a rigid system of exclusion, and none obtained access to the premises upon whose discretion I could not rely.
While your former system was in operation, do I understand you then to say that the soothing system, of which I'd heard so much, is no longer in force?
It is now several weeks since we have concluded to renounce it forever.
Indeed. You astonish me.
We found it, sir, absolutely necessary to return to the old usages. The danger of the soothing system was at times appalling, and its advantages have been much overrated. I believe, sir, that in this house it has been given a fair trial, if ever in any. We did everything that rational humanity could suggest. I'm sorry that you could not have paid us a visit at an earlier period, that you might have judged for yourself, but I presume you are conversant with the soothing practices, with its details.
Not altogether. What I have heard has been at third or fourth hand.
I may state the system then in general terms as one in which the patients were humored. We contradicted no fancies which entered the brains of the mad. On the contrary, we not only indulged but encouraged them, and many of our most permanent cures have been thus effected. There is no argument which so touches the feeble reason of the madman as the argumentum ad absurdum. We have had women, for example, who fancied themselves chickens. The cure was to insist upon the thing as a fact. To accuse the patient of stupidity is not sufficiently perceiving it to be a fact, and thus to refuse her any other diet for a week than that which properly appertains to a chicken. In this manner, a little corn and gravel were made to perform wonders.
But was this species of acquiescence all?
By no means. We put much faith in amusement of a simple kind, such as music, dancing, gymnastic exercises generally, cards, certain classes of books, and so forth, we affected to treat each individual as if for some ordinary physical disorder, and the word lunacy was never employed. A great point was to set each lunatic to guard the actions of all the others. To repose confidence in the understanding or thoughts of a madman is to gain him body and soul. In this way, we were enabled to dispense with an expensive body of keepers.
And you had no punishments of any kind?
None.
And you never confined your patients?
Very rarely, now and then, the malady of some individual growing to a crisis or taking a sudden turn of fury, we conveyed him to a secret cell, lest his disorder should infect the rest, and there kept him until we could dismiss him to his friends, for with the raging maniac we had nothing to do. He is usually removed to the public hospitals.
And you have now changed all this, and you think for the better?
Decidedly. The system had its disadvantages, and even its dangers. It is now happily exploded through all maisons de sang of France.
I'm very much surprised at what you tell me, for I made sure that at this moment, no other treatment for mania existed in any portion of the country.
You are young yet, my friend, but the time will arrive when you will learn to judge for yourself what is going on in the world without trusting to gossip of others. Believe nothing you hear, and only one half that you see. Now, about our maison de sang, it is clear that some ignoramus has misled you. After dinner, however, when you have sufficiently recovered from the fatigue of your ride, I will be happy to take you to the house and introduce you to a system which, in my opinion, and in that of everyone who has witnessed its operations, is incomparably the most effectual as yet devised.
Your own, one of your own invention.
I am proud to acknowledge that it is, at least in some measure. I cannot let you see my patients just at present. To a sensitive mind, there is always more or less of the shocking in such exhibitions, and I do not wish to spoil your appetite for dinner. We will dine. I can give you some villa la menholt with cauliflower in veloute sauce. After that, a glass of Claus de Vogat. Then your nerves will be sufficiently steadied.
Honey, your heart is so loud. The downstairs neighbors keep complaining that they can hear it beating through the floor.
I can't help it. Nothing I've tried has worked. All day and night, I can only hear the beating of my hideous heart.
Has this ever happened to you? Do you hear the telltale signs of heart pain? They heard, they suspected, they knew that you need Dr. Raven's heart medicine. This medicine cures heart disease, prevents cardiac arrest, and quiets the sound of your rapidly beating heart. Side effects include may make your heart grow 3 sizes or spontaneously combust.
Get Dr. Raven's heart medicine today!
And now we return to our mysterious tale of the discovery and the system of Dr. Tarr and Professor Fether.
Where were we? Oh, yes. At 6, dinner was announced, and my host conducted me into a large dining hall where a very numerous company were assembled, 25 or 30 in all. They were apparently people of rank, certainly of high breeding. There was an air of oddity, in short, about the dress of the whole party, which at first caused me to recur to my original idea of the soothing system, and to fancy that Monsieur Millard had been willing to deceive me until after dinner, that I might experience no uncomfortable feelings during the repast at finding myself dining with lunatics. But I remembered having been informed in Paris that the Southern provincialists were an exceedingly eccentric people, having many antiquated notions. And then, too, upon conversing with several members of the company, my apprehensions were immediately and fully dispelled. At the farther end of the apartment were seated 7 or 8 people with fiddles, pipes, and trombones, and a drum. These fellows annoyed me very much at intervals during the repast by an infinite variety of noises which were intended for music and which appeared to afford much entertainment to all present, with the exception of myself. The conversation in the meantime was spirited in general. I soon found that nearly all the company were well educated, and my host was a world of good-humored anecdotes in himself. A great many amusing stories were told, having references to the whims of the patients.
We had a lady here once, a lady that fancied herself a teapot. It is especially singular how often the particular irrational belief has entered the brain of a lunatic. There is scarcely an insane asylum in France that can supply a human teapot. Our lady was a patronio to wear teapots, and was careful to polish herself every morning with buckskin and whitening.
And then we had here, not long ago, a person who had taken it into her head that she was a donkey, which, allegorically speaking, you would say was quite true. She was a troublesome patient, and we had much ado to keep her within bounds. For a long time she would eat nothing but thistles. But of this idea we soon cured her by insisting upon her eating nothing else. Then she was perpetually kicking out her heels, so,
Madame Cook! I will thank you to behave yourself. Please keep your feet to yourself. You have spoiled my brocade. Is it necessary, pray, to illustrate a remark in so practical a style? Our friend here can surely comprehend you without all this. Upon my word, you are nearly as great a donkey as the poor unfortunate imagined herself. Your acting is very natural, as I live.
Oh, mille pardons, mademoiselle, 1,000 pardons. I had no intention of offending. Mademoiselle Laplace, Madame de Coq will do herself the honor of taking wine with you.
Allow me, mon ami. Allow me to send you a morsel of this Villa Saint Linhold. You will find it particularly fine.
At this instant, 3 sturdy waiters had just succeeded in depositing safely upon the table an enormous dish or trencher containing what I suppose to be the monstrum horrendum informe and genus Q lumen ademptum. A closer scrutiny assured me, however, that it was only a small calf, roasted whole and set upon its knees, with an apple in its mouth, as is the English fashion for dressing a hare. Thank you. No, to say the truth, I'm not particularly partial to veal a la Saint. What is it? For I do not find it altogether agrees with me. I will change my plate, however, and try some of the rabbit.
Pierre, change this gentleman's plate and give him a side piece of this rabbit al cha.
This what?
This rabbit al cha.
Why, thank you. Upon second thoughts, no, I will just help myself to some of the ham. There is no knowing what one eats, thought I to myself, at the tables of these people of the province. I will have none of their rabbit in the style of cat, and for that matter, none of their cat in the style of rabbit either.
And then, among other oddities, we had a patient once upon a time who very pertinaciously maintained himself to be a Cordova cheese, and went about with a knife in his hand, soliciting his friends to try a small slice from the middle of his leg.
He was a great fool beyond doubt, but not to be compared with a certain individual whom we all know, with the exception of this strange gentleman. I mean, the man who took himself for a bottle of champagne, and always went off with a pop and a fizz in this fashion.
And then there was an ignoramus who mistook herself for a frog, which, by the way, she resembled in no little degree. I wish you could have seen her, sir. It would have done your heart good to see the natural airs that she put on. Sir, if that woman was not a frog, I can only observe that it is a pity she was not. Her croak thus, was the finest note in the world, B flat. And when she put her elbows upon the table, thus, after taking a glass or two of wine, and descended her mouth thus, and rolled up her eyes thus, and winked them with excessive rapidity thus, why then, sir, I take it upon myself to say positively that you would have been lost in admiration of the genius of the workman.
I have no doubt.
And then there was Petite Galerd, who took himself for a piece of snuff, and was truly distressed because he could not take himself between his own finger and thumb.
And then there was Jules de Soliers, who was a very singular genius indeed, and went mad with the idea that she was a pumpkin. She persecuted the cook to make her up into pies, a thing which the cook indignantly refused to do. For my part, I am by no means sure that a pumpkin pie a la de Soliers would not have been very capital eating indeed.
You astonish me.
Ha ha ha, he he, ho ho, ho hoo, very good indeed. You must not be astonished, mon ami. Our friend here is a wit, a droll. You must not understand her to the letter.
And then there was Buffoon La Grande, another extraordinary personage in her way. She grew deranged through love and fancied herself possessed of two heads. One of these she maintained to be the head of Cicero. The other she imagined a composite one, being Demosthenes from the top of the forehead to the mouth, and Lord Brockham's from the mouth to the chin. It is not impossible that she was wrong, but she would have convinced you of her being in the right, for she was a woman of great eloquence. She had an absolute passion for oratory and could not refrain from display. For example, she used to leap upon the dinner table, thus,
and then there was Ballard, the teetotum. I call him the teetotum because, in fact, he was seized with the droll, but not altogether irrational belief that he had been converted into a gambler's spinning top, a teetotum. You would have roared with laughter to see him spin. He would turn round upon one heel by the hour in this manner.
But then your Monsieur Ballard was a madman, and a very silly madman at best. Allow me to ask you, ever heard of a human teetotum? The thing is absurd. Madame Joyeuse was a more sensible person, as you know. She had an irrational belief, but it was instinct with common sense, and gave pleasure to all who had the honor of her acquaintance. She found, upon mature deliberation, that by some accident she had been turned into a chicken cock, but as such she behaved with propriety. She flapped her wings with prodigious effect, so, and as for her crow, it was delicious. Cock-a-doodle-doo, cock-a-doodle-doo, cock-a-doodle-doo.
Madame Joyeuse, I will thank you to behave yourself. You can either conduct yourself as a lady should do, or you can quit the table forthwith. Take your choice.
The lady whom I was astonished to hear addressed as Madame Joyeuse, after the description of Madame Joyeuse she had just given, blushed up to the eyebrows. She hung down her head and said not a syllable in reply. But another and younger lady resumed the theme. It was my beautiful singing girl of the little parlor.
Oh, Madame Joyeuse was a fool, but there was really much sound sense, after all, in the opinion of Eugenie Salsafette. She was a very beautiful and painfully modest young lady, who thought the ordinary mode of habiliment indecent, and wished to dress herself always by getting outside instead of inside of her clothes. It is a thing very easily done, after all. You have only to do so, and then so, and then so, and then so.
That is sufficient.
My nerves are very much affected indeed by these yells. For the rest of the company, I really pitied. I never saw any set of reasonable people so thoroughly frightened in my life. They all grew as pale as many corpses, and shrinking within their seats, sat quivering and gibbering with terror, and listening for a repetition of the sound. It came again. Louder and seemingly nearer, and then a third time. Very loud, and then a fourth time. With a vigor evidently diminished. At this apparent dying away of the noise, the spirits of the company were immediately regained, and all was life and anecdote as before. What is the nature of such a noise?
Oh, a mere trifle. We are used to these things and care really very little about them. The lunatics every now and then get up a howl in concert, one starting the other, as in sometimes the case with a bevy of dogs at night. It occasionally happens, however, that the concerto yells are usually succeeded by a simultaneous effort at breaking loose, when of course some little danger is to be apprehended.
And how many have you in charge?
At present we have not more than 10 altogether.
Principally female, I presume.
Oh, no, every one of them men, and stout fellows too, I can tell you.
Indeed. I have always understood that the majority of lunatics were of the gentler sex.
It is generally so, but not always. Some time ago, there were about 27 patients here, and of that number, no less than 18 were women. But lately, matters have changed very much, as you see.
Yes, have changed very much, as you see.
Oh, yes.
Hold your tongues, every one of you.
And this gentlewoman, this good lady who has just spoken, who gives us the cock-a-doodle-doo, she, I presume, is harmless. Quite harmless, eh?
Harmless? Why, what can you mean?
Only slightly touched. I take it for granted that she's not dangerously affected, eh?
Manda! What is it you imagine? This lady, my particular old friend, Madame Joyeuse, is as absolutely sane as myself. She has her little eccentricities, to be sure, but then you know, all old women, all very old women, are more or less eccentric.
To be sure, and then the rest of these ladies and gentlemen
are my friends and keepers, my very good friends and assistants.
What? All of them? The women and all?
Assuredly. We could not do it all without the women. They are the best lunatic nurses in the world. They have a way of their own, you know. Their bright eyes have a marvelous effect. Something like the fascination of a snake, you know.
To be sure. They behave a little odd, eh? Don't you think so?
Odd? Why, do you really think so? We are not very prudish, to be sure. Here in the South, do pretty much as we please. Enjoy life and all that sort of thing, you know.
To be sure.
And then perhaps this Claus de Volgap is a little heady, you know, a little strong. You understand, eh?
To be sure. Oh, by the by, monsieur, did I understand you to say that the system you have adopted instead of the celebrated soothing system, was one of very rigorous severity?
By no means. Our confinement is necessarily close, but the medical treatment, I mean, is rather agreeable to the patients than otherwise.
And the new system is one of your own invention?
Not altogether. Some portions of it are referable to Dr. Tarr, of whom you have necessarily heard. And again, there are modifications in my plan which I am happy to acknowledge as belonging of right to the celebrated Fether, with whom, if I mistake not, you have the honor of an intimate acquaintance.
I'm quite ashamed to confess that I have never heard of the names of either gentleman before.
Good heavens! I surely did not hear you aright. You did not intend to say, that you never heard either of the learned Dr. Tarr or of the celebrated Professor Fether.
I am forced to acknowledge my ignorance, but the truth should be held inviolate above all things. Nevertheless, I feel humbled to the dust not to be acquainted with the works of these, no doubt, extraordinary men. I will seek out their writings forthwith and peruse them with deliberate care. Monsieur Millard, you have really, I must confess it, you have really made me ashamed of myself.
Say no more, my good young friend. Join me now in a glass of Sauterne.
If you and your kin are in need of something, spin on in for a great big win. It'd be a sin if picking pumpkins didn't give you a grin. I won't trick you like Rumpelstiltskin. If you don't come, I'll kick you in the shin and bury your body in a bin. Are you a bumpkin in need of some pumpkins? Come on down to Jules' Pumpkin Farm. Only open during the hours that the asylum lets me out.
And sir, you mentioned something before dinner about the dangers incurred in the old system of soothing. How is that?
Yes. There was occasionally very great danger indeed. There is no accounting for the caprices of madmen, and in my opinion, as well as in that of Dr. Tarr and Professor Fether, it is never safe to permit them to run at large unintended. A lunatic may be soothed, as it is called, for a time, but in the end he is very apt to become obstreperous. When a madman appears thoroughly insane, indeed, it is high time to put him in a straitjacket.
But the danger, my dear sir, of which you were speaking, in your own experience during your control of this house, have you had practical reason to think liberty hazardous in the case of a lunatic?
Here, in my own experience, why, I may say yes. For example, not very long ago, a singular circumstance occurred in this very house. The soothing system, you know, was then in operation, and patients were at large. They behaved remarkably well, especially so. Anyone of sense might have known that some devilish scheme was brewing from that particular fact, that the fellows behaved so remarkably well. And sure enough, one fine morning, the keepers found themselves pinioned, hand and foot, and thrown into cells where they were attended as if they were the lunatics, by the lunatics themselves, who had usurped the offices of the keepers.
You don't tell me so. I have never heard of anything so absurd in my life.
Fact. It all came to pass by means of a stupid fellow, a lunatic by some means taking it into his own head that he had invented a better system of government than any ever heard of before. Of lunatic government, I mean. He wished to give his invention a trial, I suppose, and so he persuaded the rest of the patients to join him in a conspiracy for the overthrowing of the reigning powers.
And he really succeeded.
No doubt of it. The keepers were soon made to exchange places. Not that exactly either, for the madman had been free. But the keepers were shut up in cells forthwith and treated, I am sorry to say, in a very cavalier manner.
But I presume a counter-revolution was soon effected. This condition of things could not have long existed. The country people and the neighborhood visitors coming to see the establishment would have given the alarm.
There you are out. The head rebel was too cunning for that. He admitted no visitors at all, with the exception one day of a very stupid-looking young gentleman, of whom he had no reason to be afraid. He let him in to see the place by way of variety, to have a little fun with him. As soon as he had gammoned him sufficiently, he let him out and sent him about his business.
And how long, then, did the madmen reign?
Oh, a very long time, indeed. A month, certainly. How much longer, I can't precisely say. In the meantime, the lunatics had a jolly season of it. That you may swear. They doffed their own shabby clothes and made free with the family wardrobe and jewels. The cellars of the chateau were well stocked with wine, and these madmen are just the devils that know how to drink it. They lived well, I can tell you.
And the treatment. What was the particular species of treatment which the leader of the rebels had put into operation?
Why, As for that, a madman is not necessarily a fool. As I have already observed, and it is my honest opinion that his treatment was a much better treatment than that which it superseded. It was a very capital system indeed. Simple, neat, no trouble at all. In fact, it was delicious, it was.
Gracious heavens, the lunatics have most undoubtedly broken loose.
I very much fear it so.
And now came the climax. The catastrophe of the drama has no resistance beyond whooping and yelling, and cockadoodling was offered to the encroachments of the party without. The 10 windows were speedily and almost simultaneously broken in. But I shall never forget the emotions of wonder and horror with which I gazed when leaping through these windows and down among us, pele-mele, fighting, stamping, scratching, and howling, there rushed a perfect army of gruesome gorillas. I received a terrible beating, after which I rolled under a sofa and lay still. After lying there some 15 minutes, during which time I listened with all my ears at what was going on in the room.
My lord, what do you have to say for yourself?
You cannot even entertain the idea that this ridiculous charade could continue indefinitely.
Now then. This is a dinner party. We have a guest. It is most unbecoming to come uninvited and without the proper offering of food or wine to your host.
Monsieur Millard, it appeared, in giving me the account of the lunatic who had excited his fellows to rebellion, had been merely relating his own exploits. This gentleman had, indeed, some 2 or 3 years before, been the superintendent of the establishment, but grew crazy himself, and so became a patient. The keepers, 10 in number, having been suddenly overpowered, were first, tarred, then carefully feathered, and then shut up in underground cells. They had been so imprisoned for more than a month, during which period Monsieur Millard had been generously allowing them not only the tar and feathers, which constituted his system, but some bread and an abundance of water, the latter of which was pumped on them daily. At length, one escaping through a sewer gave freedom to all the rest. Upon returning home, I learned that the soothing system, with important modifications, has been resumed at the chateau. Yet I cannot help agreeing with Monsieur Millard that his own treatment was a very capital one of its kind. As he justly observed, it was simple, neat, and gave no trouble at all, not the least. I have only to add that, although I have searched every library in Europe for the works of Dr. Tarr and Professor Fether, I have up to the present day utterly failed in my endeavors at procuring an edition.
And that concludes the Nash Community College Drama Player's Tale of Edgar Allan Poe's The System of Dr. Tarr and Professor Fether, a system where you should only believe half of what you see and nothing of what you hear.